G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day. Now today we're going to talk about helicopters, we're going to look at a potential base strike, of course we're then going to have a look at the maps, but firstly where we need to talk about is we need to talk about Avdiivka, as the situation here is growing more and more critical by the hour. So I'll just show you where we're talking about. So of course this is the Ukraine map. Here's the capital of Kyiv. This is Belarus, Russia around here. The red area has been occupied since the 22 invasion and the purple since 2014. Now we're coming down here into Donetsk city, and we'll see then Avdiivka. Now remember, this purple, this is where Russia got since 2014. So there's been an over 10-year border here. Now Avdiivka, it is slowly getting sort of crushed by these Russian pincers. And what we've seen today is Russia has severed the one of the last remaining two roads in and or out of Avdiivka. So this road running down here. Now, we still know that this exists through here. We are unsure about what fire that this road's actually having, as we saw Russia land a number of FABs, being their air-launched very large bombs right in this area here. And we've also heard that there is a way up and out through then this tree line. But as you can see, that this is, very, very close to where the Russian units are. So if we have a look at where this is, we're talking 500 meters. 500 meters, but now that they're across that urban zone, this is 500 meters of then flat ground. So let's look at what I'm looking at here. So I'm talking out through here and then to Svizhny as well. So you're talking straight out across open fields. 500 meters in an urban environment is significantly more than across these open fields. And for all intents and purposes, this road through here has been cut off for use by the Ukrainian forces. And that even then, they're getting hammered by these FABs and artillery. And we're going to talk about the situation in here, because we know that Ukraine's 110th Mechanized has apparently been withdrawn to the rear following their extremely costly battles in here. They've been in here since October the 10th, and that Ukraine has deployed their elite 3rd Assault Brigade into Avdiivka as reinforcements. Now, there is no confirmation yet that Ukraine is planning to withdraw. And we're going to talk about that withdrawal, because I actually feel like the withdrawal now is actually off the table. Lots of people are saying Ukraine should withdraw. The withdrawal option may actually be off the table, and a potential attempt to withdraw of however many soldiers in here, I've heard somewhere from 1,500 to over 3,000, to actually withdraw that along these compromised routes. And, just because things can travel down this does not mean that that route is not compromised by things like mortar fire, could then suffer incredibly high casualties. And I think Defmon yesterday said it best when he said losing Avdiivka isn't that great of a loss for Ukraine, but committing and depleting forces could be catastrophic. So we're going to look over a few of people's, opinions on this area. Now, this is from another pro-Ukraine account saying, for F's sake, Ukraine, leave Avdiivka. Why do they continue to make the same effing move? The city is irrelevant. Who cares? Just leave. Now, one thing I will say is this city is definitely not irrelevant. Somewhere you fought for the best part of basically the entire war. It is still very, very relevant. And as well, where does this then close up through here? What else does Russia then get? And of course, we know Russia wants to hold more territory and control everywhere from Vuhledar through here, through to Mariinka, Novomylivka, where Russia has made ground, all the way up into here. So saying it is irrelevant, no, but to the sort of last man defense of this area, well, yes, I disagree with that strategy and tactic here. So we have a look down on the south too. We've talked about the north, but this south is closing up on whatever forces are left down in here in this open area, as well as we see that Russia has closed this sort of bowl in here right around. And if we take where the grey zone to grey zone is, let's see if we can get a measurement across here. Oh, maybe not. Yep. Of 500 meters. But again, 500 meters of very open ground. Meter to meter difference is dramatic when we're talking urban versus open ground. So Avdiivka at the moment is an absolute boiling point of what is happening down in here. Now, we're talking about this supply route. Well, we have some footage of what this is actually looking like. Now, what we heard was that there is one last sort of paved road, although the condition of that is going to be, you know, not great with the amount of shells and bombs and stuff that landed, and then like a soil track through here. And I'm sure there's some as well through these other areas. You know, military vehicles can go off-road, but we have some footage apparently on that last remaining route here as well of this then vehicle bogged with the soldiers trying to get this vehicle out, and they're putting themselves in a great amount of harm here as well. And you can hear in the back of the video the shelling as well. You can just hear that there, as well as more footage here apparently of foot soldiers on that same road, and just how much this has then been chewed up. Now, if you've ever been on a farm, you know how much a tractor rips up a paddock. Try having a 60-ton tank skid steering on tracks. That is, you know, what it does, and it will rip it up to this. And we know that Avdiivka, this area, the Donetsk Oblast, has had terrible, terrible weather more than the last week, coming out of that real cold season, thawing out that it is just then mud. And we also have footage as well from American AMRAP, but with Ukrainians here getting hit by mortar fire. And we're not going to show that because I can't. What are you trying to donate here? But what we see is then this mortar fire sits, I haven't got the perfect geolocation, but let's say we see where this road comes out, just about here. So grey zone. The reason that's important is then we can presume all of this within that is under mortar fire. We knew this, but it gives confirmation to where the mortar fire is. So it will even then drastically reduce movements down then this road here as well. This situation is growing very dire, and it has been growing dire for a long time now. Now, let's have a look at then where the Surak maps is showing this change. Now, down in the south, it is showing basically the exact same that then the deep state map showed. So we like that. And then in the north, it is showing, I actually believe, less than the deep state map is showing, because this road is this road here, and the deep state, which is the pro-Ukrainian map, is showing a push not only to that, but then over that, then severing that artery there. So what we like is two maps from separate accounts who may be on different sides of political spectrums agreeing on what is actually happening in here. So let's look at what Surak says. Russian army reached the Avenue Street and separated Ukrainian troops in the Avdiivka coke plant from the rest of the city. What then he's talking about here is this is Avdiivka city, and then the coke plant here, that this between here and here has now been separated. So you've got then troops that are out in this location without supply or direct lines of communication to each other. Yesterday, we mentioned that there was a little chance for a safe Ukrainian withdrawal from Avdiivka. With the loss of the main artery, the thousands of Ukrainian troops deployed there could be completely cut off, and the Russian advance could be accelerated by Ukrainian withdrawals. So, like we said, to actually now try and withdraw may be more costly than trying to fight for it back. From the southern axis, Russian troops advanced again in the northeast of Opitny, reducing the bottleneck over the Ukrainian army's positions in the former air defense missile battalion. 35% of the city is now under Russian control. So getting that squeeze both in the south and the north and closing this up. And let's just have a look at, let's just go grey zone to grey zone across here of 3.49 kilometers across very, very flat ground out here that we know mortars, machine gun fire will cover these areas. So the actual opportunity to withdraw may, I'm not saying it has, but it may have now actually gone. Now, let's have a look then, Surak, and we'll look at the Rybar Russian sources. And the Rybar is showing very similar to this northern advance up to the railway, but interesting on the Rybar, which is the Russian sources map. It's not showing this push down to the reservoir here, so we're unsure on that, but it's actually not showing either that the Russian forces have actually got up to this road that then the deep state is showing. So if the deep state is showing that the Russian advance is further than the Russian maps, I'm going to probably go with that. The deep state is then accurate on this. Now, Surak says, following today's advance, Russian army and Avdiivka coke plant is physically separated from the rest of the city, like his update prior to this. So it is getting critical. And one thing I want to point out is that Ukraine cannot afford the same attrition that Russia can. Russia's tactics are different, and they've got a far significantly bigger population than Ukraine as well, and far more vehicles, planes, choppers, everything. So 1 for 1 doesn't work here, and Ukraine has expressed over the past weeks and months how they need more troops, they need to mobilize more people, and having something like this, potentially then collapsing is not a great sign. Now, Ukraine's new head of the defense, General Syrskyi, has come out with some interesting bits and pieces in an interview with the German ZDF channel. Now, this is watchable on YouTube, but it is in German and the translation doesn't really work well. So I've got some excerpt pullouts of here that he says Ukraine troops have switched from offensive to defensive posture. According to Syrskyi, Russian troops are attacking along the entire front line. He describes the situation as difficult and quite tense. And he says, the purpose of our defence operation is to exhaust the enemy's losses, to inflict maximum losses by using our fortifications, technical advantages, drone, EW, and by holding prepared defensive lines. Now, we have heard Ukrainian soldiers complain about the defensive works were not to the scratch they should have been in here. But saying again, same note that we saw in Bakhmut. Now, remember, he was in charge down at Bakhmut too of this idea of when we're exhausting the enemy, we're holding this area and continue to hold and hold and hold because the enemy's pouring so many people in that then we are then exhausting the enemy from there. And we've heard this a lot. That said, this can backfire as well. And many people have said that then the situation in Bakhmut was never this critical. And I agree, I covered Bakhmut extensively, and if we look at where this is sort of gripping down and the actual ways in and out of here, I believe it is worse. But what we want to touch on as well is this idea of changing from offensive to defensive. So the Russian army is now advancing along the entire front line. The situation can be called complicated. The Ukrainian army has shifted from offensive actions to defensive, the purpose of which is to inflict maximum losses on the Russian Federation. Now, I thought Ukraine's offensive action ended late last year when it really petered out at the end of then their spring, summer, into winter offensive, and that Ukraine was on the defense. Now, if you're only switching now, what defensive works have actually been built? There should be a concern there. And on the offensive, if Russia's advancing, you need to then go into defense and try and inflict the casualties then and now. I don't really see if there was a change of posture now. I thought we're all on the same wavelength that Ukraine in this area was defensive posturing, putting in mines, putting in trenches, putting in sighted guns, whatever they could to try and hold the Russian impending advance out of Avdiivka. But keep an eye on this area. Some people are turning a blind eye to it, but this is an incredibly important area and really could turn into a turning point in this war, which is what we're going to talk about next. But we did see a video yesterday that showed you of a Ukrainian soldier filming within the coke plant, and I said I don't have then a translation on this. Now, luckily, Ukraine Defense actually put up a translation in their post of the same video. This is the Avdiivka coke plant looks like. You see, everything is broken, ruined. They keep hitting it and don't let me take a break. We hold on and we will hold on. There is no other way. And then they put in a bit of their own opinion about what Elon Musk has said, that this spending does not help Ukraine, prolonging the war and sacrificing the flower of youth. Having these boys die for nothing is wrong and needs to stop. Of course, that was on an online thing with the number of other figures in it as well. And this is speaking about the money that's potentially coming from the House of Reps into Ukraine. But I said before that I feel as if we're at a turning point in the war. Now, over in the past couple of weeks, we've seen Ukraine has completely restructured its entire upper echelon of commanders, General Syrskyi, who we just talked about, and it's focusing on mass recruitment and mobilization of men, while saying that strategically they're focusing on their unmanned power, both in the air and the sea. So your sea baby drones and then your drones in the air, everything from the ones that drop munitions to FPV to then ISR assets as well. And this all comes as Ukraine is waiting for the F-16s to actually get airborne in Ukraine and continuing focusing on getting more military aid from Western nations. Of course, the big part in this is the money stuck in the House of Representatives in the US being over $60 billion. On that note of turning points, we see that Russia has seemed to iron out some of the earlier issues that we saw, particularly the link between command and soldiers. Now, I'm not saying that this is great or fixed, but it has seemed to have gotten better. And this has reduced those catastrophic losses that we've seen in other offensives on these scales. And this, in my opinion, is actually where Wagner PMC helped Russia the most, that while Wagner was pushing in Bakhmut, that Wagner then took the brunt of the losses for a couple of months, while the Russians back in Russia could actually rebuild then their regular army and build those defensive lines. Yes, Wagner took huge casualties, but they sit outside of the regular forces and they could mobilize guys from, say, prisons. They take it on, bit of a relief for the other units to pull out and then retrain up. And now we're seeing that has then reflowed back in and then are having successes on the front line. Now, these changes in Ukraine and Russia, these can be interpreted in many different ways, and strong arguments actually formed both ways, that this is the collapse and desperation to this is the point at which things start to improve after a stumble. And you can make solid arguments for Ukraine and for Russia in both of those aspects. But something that I want to point out is this idea that there is some four-dimensional chess moves being made on the battlefield. Now, what is 4D chess? You'll hear this term thrown around. And I think the best layman's way to describe it is what looks to you and everyone else like a stupid mistake is really secretly a calculated genius move that you're too unintelligent to comprehend. And this is what we may have thought was happening. But for those of you flag waving and chanting, I'm sorry to tell you, but there is no grand four-dimensional chess game happening here. Just a hell of a lot of bureaucracy. Now, with this, initially we thought that Russia was having some 4D chess move with its far less powerful invasion than we thought that Russia could actually have. And we're going to see the T-14s and the Su-57s are going to come in and Russia will sweep over. And that never came. And then with Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive, the slow start of many axes at once, we thought this is some 4D chess move to warm up into something that, you know, we haven't even seen coming yet, that it's too over our heads for us to understand what's happening, and then trickled to a halt very quickly after that. Now, this has turned from what we may have thought to a war of attrition. So if you're reading in that this is happening on purpose because there's 4D chess on either side, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're likely incorrect. People will bring up commanders, you know, well back doing these chess moves, but that was before the days of massive ISR, massive command structures, and learning about history of war and how things can move and seeing where enemy goes, that nothing is said, done, or moved without it being seen now. And I think the days of some of those moves, other than some genius move somewhere, is sort of done, and that we're just going to have this attritional style warfare like we are now seeing. We are going to go just down onto the maps again, and we're going to go to the south and look at Mariinka and Novomaylivka as well. So we do see that Russia has extended grey zone just out from Mariinka, but to no actual frontline shift. But in Novomaylivka as well, we do see that Russia has pushed into more of this township as well. Now, Russia took many, many months and probably huge casualties actually attempting this break-in. And you and I said that the hardest part would actually be getting this break-in. We first saw Russia attempt to break in into here and then was pushed back out. We then saw a push from the north that failed. We then saw, if we go back, we can't go back a map, but it looked like this. We then see a break in here, and now this has expanded into what we see here, taking over more control. Breaking into the urban environment, the initial break-in is the hardest part of this. And we'll actually have a look on the Novomaylivka map, and this is looking basically the exact same, although it is showing that Russia has made more territory in this paddock here, closing then that north to south push. But Russian army continued advancing in Novomaylivka and begun advancing in the northeastern forest belt, located in the grey zone, in order to increase the pressure over Ukraine army inside of the town, which currently holds 80%. And by the deep state map as well, yeah, I'd say it's 20 to 80%. So Russia hold 20, Ukraine hold 80. Now, we're just going to go north a bit. I know the map's a little bit all over the place, up then into Bakhmut. Now, I believe the deep state map, no, it doesn't show us any change, well, from the 13th for the 2 updates, but then if we roll back to then the 12th, we do see this major push to the 13th out from then Kromovy there. Sorry, there's 2 updates on the 13th. That's where I went wrong. And then nothing down in the south. Sorry, that was new to me as well. So we do see this advancement trying to come down to this Ivanovsky as well. Now, we know that Russia's ultimate plan here is to get the high ground that sits around Chasiv Yar. This and this were the roads of life in Bakhmut at this time last year. But let's just have a measure and see how far then that came over the day. So from here to say here, about, let's say, about a kilometre in there. So that is a reasonable advance and recapturing positions that Ukraine did manage to gain in their counter-offensive. Now, let's have a look on the Syriac map. Now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to see just because the map doesn't line up. See this road through Kromove. This is then this road. This red here is then Kromove. Now, north of Bakhmut, Russian army took full control over the Popovsky area and are now moving towards the trench positions north of Ivanovsky down here. Taking these positions would benefit Russia in capturing the town as it is on high ground. Meanwhile, Russian and Ukrainian reinforcements are building up around and inside Ivanovsky in preparation for the battle ahead. So we know that into Chasiv Yar is critical for this area. So Ukraine will try and push back Russia as much as they can from Ivanovsky. Now, this is new territory that Russia will be pushing across, not then reclaimed from the counter-offensive. Now, up north, I have double-checked, there is no shift on this map. Now, one that Syriac doesn't have, but the Deep State does, is that it does look like Ukraine did manage to gain just a bit more territory in this Krinky bridgehead here. So they have extended it a fair bit considering the actual size of it. And I think the importance to, not only importance to Ukraine, so we're looking at about 4Ks, not only the importance to Ukraine, but how significant that is for Russia. If Russia are trying to hold the Kherson Oblast, that you've still got this bridgehead being controlled here, that they really need to potentially get rid of this bridgehead before it grows into anything. But at the same time, they may have the opinion of, yeah, but as long as they don't extend it too much, we still have the ability to just absolutely whack this with artillery. And as long as they don't start getting tanks, armor, and vehicles across here, leave them at it. Maybe that is the thought process here, because I can't see how, when we're talking 4Ks by 500 meters, so only a couple of square kilometers, I can't see how the artillery cannot just completely flatten this, which we have seen that anyone could actually hold anything there. So maybe it's just a bit of a holding operation and start hitting it harder, reserve the ammo in case more starts moving across. That is my read on that, and I could be incorrect, but I think that is interesting. And on the Avdiivka bit, I'll actually show you some footage as well, I hope, of the amount of like fabs and stuff that is actually landing in here. Now, there has been a fair bit of misinformation or real information. You can't read between the lines. People are calling this an operation, just a psyop, but there is a lot of information coming out from Russian accounts that over here in Seladovi and down in here near Tsusorny has been hit with a major Russian strike by missile strikes and has taken out a number of Ukrainian troops. And what they're saying is in here and here that they are then building up these reinforcements to move then into Avdiivka. That is what they are then saying. So they'll move then into here and then create this cutoff through here and then push into Avdiivka sort of like this. So that is what the movement is saying in there. But there has been some call out saying that this didn't happen either. So this is a pro-Russian account has said this. There has been reportedly a mass casualty event in the sound of Seladovo where Russian Iskander reportedly cluster munitions from a Smerch, which is like multiple launch rocket system, but bigger again, devastated the AFU training ground. Some sources are saying 600 casualties, but number that is completely unconfirmed. So there's no confirmation and subject to review. The estimate comes from the accompanying reports that hospital beds in Dnipro have been completely filled. So Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, this bloke has confirmed arrivals. So has said stuff has come in, but also has, nothing is confirmed that it is then to the extent that it's said. Now, General Tarnavsky has then come out with this, that warning from the press center of Ukraine, there's Russian disinformation. Russian propagandists launched a disinformation campaign about the alleged losses of defense forces of Ukraine in Seladov in Donetsk region. In this way, the enemy diverts attention from his daily colossal losses in this direction. They amounted to 645 people on Feb 12. So that's, he's saying Russian losses. So he's saying that they are trying to then push, away from their losses onto this then happening, saying trust only official sources of information. That said, in this sort of stuff, we never really know what happened. Same with the base that was hit down to the south of Lviv. This is very early in the war. This is like the first couple of weeks it was reported. I think like 20 or 30 guys died. And I know guys who were there, I think some have actually come on the podcast, who have said it was well over 100. So, on anything like this, just wait out. But there is some footage. Now, this is actually from, I think, Rybar. I believe, yes, it is. But this footage is floating around and has been geolocated to being down in here. Now, in this, you can't see the hundreds of people, but you can see that there definitely were strikes, clusters, and that there was definitely military-style vehicles here. But the numbers they're saying, no. As well as we know that arrivals there did happen, but the claims could be over-exaggerated massively. Against backdrop of highly debated attack on the temporary deployment point of Ukrainian forces in the Seledovo, footage has emerged from a strike of the parking lot of Ukrainian equipment near the village of Sukarino, which is, I believe, down here of what we're talking. The enemy's position was identified from air and rocket artillery, was used to attack the targets. So I'm sure you've probably seen this footage by now. And it is an interesting piece to look at. And like we spoke about yesterday with propaganda, well, it goes both ways. You never know what to bloody believe because there's examples of, pushing information around on both sides. Now, we're going to talk about choppers. And we know that Ukraine has lost a Mi-8 helicopter down in Roputny in here. So let's have a look. This was then geolocated basically right smack dead center in the middle of here. I'll show you a little bit of footage here that we can see it popping off flares and chaff. I know there's a difference between the two, but I can't identify which is which. And then the chopper goes down, of which I won't show you, but it has said that the crew then has got away and survived, and they're within Ukrainian territory, so they would then be all right to continue the move out there. But speaking more of choppers, there's more and more picking up about the Australian MRH-90, or as people call them, the Taipan choppers, that these photos are released that people are saying Ukraine should get these choppers. So leaked photo reveals dismantled Taipans, MRH-90s, in a warehouse for burial, reigniting frustrations not to send the aircraft to Ukraine. Now, I've just put a little note on what I've named this here. I've spelled something wrong. But these choppers in Australia, we had no luck with it, and these actually ended up killing multiple people because of bloody problems with these choppers. And as far as I'm aware, they're still under active investigation, which pisses me off because I'm like, well, why are you burying these if there's still investigation going on? But also, there is a known fault in these aircraft. Okay, we know there's a fault. We're getting rid of tens of millions of dollars worth of aircraft because we know there's a fault. I've just thought about, does this open up, if we did gift them to Ukraine, out of kindness, saying, yep, here you go, does that open up Australia to actually legal fault? If then there's a fault, does that open up Australia to legal action, selling then a faulty item? Now, I think that it probably would if we know there's a fault and we've then given these in and it goes wrong. I guess potentially. Now, people are saying, oh, they wouldn't care about this. But still, does it actually open up to that? Maybe that is one of the significant reasons of why these are being buried instead of pushed on, that no one wanted to buy them. But this article does go on that the Defence Department said the assembly of the MRH-90 fleet was well advanced and no aircraft are in flying conditions. Now, this bloke from the Army Aviation Association has issued then this statement. From the outset, Australia would be gifting a poison chalice, so something with known faults. If Australia was not capable of keeping the MRH to a flying status that enabled even the minimum acceptable flying rates of effort to keep aircrew competent, what chance does a country at war with limited people and resources have? And that is true. Australia, we are a wealthy country, not at war, and with allies where we can go and train. And with peacetime, we can just learn this, and we've had to just scrap the whole bloody program. I agree with what he says, but what chance does then a country like Ukraine have with no experience on this platform in a wartime of this? But at the same time, the pro-Ukraine side will say, that's not your concern, though. That's not your concern. Once they're delivered, leave it to us. But he continues. There is nothing simple about turning a few spinners when it comes to an all-composite digital fly-by-wire helicopter. This is why I'm going back to the Black Hawk. Far more simple, bloody just workhorse-style chopper. He also pointed out how many European nations, Belgium, Sweden, Norway, and Greece, which now operate the NH-90, same aircraft, were now retiring the complex aircraft. We see that, I believe, Germany is also retiring theirs at the end of their lifespan, I believe, but we do know that Germany's getting rid of their Tigers like we are too. And we'll speak on that. Of the 14 nations that bore the NH-90, same aircraft, 4 are completely withdrawing from their NH-90s, and 1 is withdrawing half. We asked why Germany, Belgium, Sweden, Norway have not offered to donate their NH90. Our country at war needs reliable equipment that is guaranteed to operate and be battle ready. I would contest the NH90 is neither. Again, same aircraft. That he's saying, I'll refer to you to what the Ukrainian ambassador said. It's time to move on. Now, it's looking like that these are 100% not going to go into Ukraine. I can see the argument for it, but is there an element too that that Australia is not wanting to open itself to potential legal fallout from this, the poison chalice? And once they were in there, how would these actually change the warfare? We've spoken about this. Transport choppers, they're not going to have that much of an effect, and they're going to be incredibly expensive, incredibly long time to get them to even some level of operating. We couldn't do it over a number of years in peacetime. So very difficult. But I've spoken that Germany and Australia are getting rid of our Tiger attack helicopters, which are littered with same issues. That's why we're getting rid of them, to go to Apaches. But they're not buried yet, and there's probably time to train people on these. They're not in a hole in the ground. I don't know. That's what I would be looking at. Legends. End of another video. Yep, just had to double check. Look after yourselves. If you want to support me, there's links down below, but never, ever feel obliged. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.